Billionaire works as janitor for a weak poor girl, brings him lunch without knowing who he is. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The industrial floor cleaner left a sharp scent in the air as Daniel Morgan pushed the mop across the marble lobby of Pinnacle Enterprises. Just 6 days ago, he had been sitting 50 floors above in a penthouse office, wearing an Italian suit and signing contracts worth millions. Now, he wore faded blue coveralls with a name tag that said Dan. His designer watch had been replaced by a battered Timex. He looked like any other janitor in the building, invisible to the people who used to bow their heads when he passed. The hum of computers and echo of hurried footsteps filled the air. A few employees nodded politely. Most did not notice him at all. That was exactly why he was here. Daniel had spent years hearing his board talk about empathy, but he had begun to wonder if he himself remembered what that word meant. He had built this company from a small startup into an empire, yet lately, every decision felt like it was measured in profit, not people. So he made a decision that startled even his closest advisors. For 1 week, he would trade places with the lowest position in the company. No cameras, no publicity, just truth. As he scrubbed a stubborn stain near the security desk, a voice called out, "Hey, new guy, do not forget the corners." Daniel smiled faintly. That was Hector, the head of maintenance, one of the few who knew the truth. The day moved slowly. He noticed how employees dropped coffee cups near trash bins, never looking back. No one thanked the janitors. No one even saw them. By noon, Daniel's back ached. He leaned against his mop, breathing in the sterile air, when the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A young woman hurried through the lobby, holding a small paper bag in one hand and a stack of folders in the other. She looked flustered, her blouse slightly wrinkled, hair tied in a loose bun. She was clearly late and nervous. When she reached the desk, the folders slipped from her arms and scattered across the clean floor Daniel had just finished mopping. She froze, eyes wide with embarrassment. "I am so sorry," she whispered, kneeling to gather them. Daniel knelt beside her without hesitation. "It happens to everyone," he said gently. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same paper. For a brief second, their eyes met. Hers were warm, brown, and tired but kind. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I have been running all morning. I forgot my lunch too." She laughed nervously. "It is one of those days." Daniel noticed the paper bag in her hand. "Is that for someone?" he asked. She nodded. "For me, actually. I made 2 sandwiches last night by accident. Would you like one? You look like you have been working hard." Daniel hesitated, caught off guard by her kindness. No one had offered him anything in days. "That is very kind," he replied softly. She smiled, handing him the sandwich wrapped neatly in foil. "My name is Lucia," she said before rushing toward the elevators. Daniel watched her go, the faint scent of homemade bread lingering in the air. For the first time in a long while, something in him stirred a memory of humility, of gratitude. He looked down at the sandwich in his hand and smiled to himself. For a man who owned everything, it had been a very long time since anyone had given him something from the heart. The next morning began before sunrise, and the city outside Pinnacle Enterprises was still wrapped in a pale grey mist. Daniel Morgan arrived early, carrying the same mop and bucket as before, his breath visible in the cold air. The marble floors gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights, and every sound echoed through the empty lobby. It felt both peaceful and lonely, but he found comfort in the silence. By 7 o'clock, employees began to stream in, heels clicking, coffee cups in hand, eyes glued to their phones. None of them noticed the man who opened doors for them or quietly picked up their dropped papers. That invisibility was strangely freeing. He had lived decades being watched, judged, and feared. Now, for the first time, he could observe without being recognized. Around 9, he saw Lucia again. She was balancing a laptop bag, her lunch container, and a small potted plant that looked like it had been rescued from the brink of death. She greeted the receptionist with a polite smile before hurrying toward the elevators. Daniel caught the faint trace of her perfume, something light and hopeful, like citrus and soap. Later that morning, he was assigned to clean the 22nd floor accounting. Lucia's department. As he pushed the cart down the hallway, he heard raised voices through an open office door. "Miss Rodriguez, your report was due at 9, said a sharp male voice. "It is almost 11. Do you think deadlines are suggestions?" Daniel peered in just enough to see Lucia standing beside her cubicle, holding a stack of files to her chest. "I stayed late last night to finish the quarterly numbers," she explained softly. "My son was sick, and I had to take him to urgent care after work. I sent an email to—" "Excuses," the man interrupted coldly. "This company rewards results, not stories. If you cannot handle your responsibilities, perhaps you should reconsider your position." Lucia's lips pressed together, but she nodded quietly. Daniel recognized that tone. It was the same one he had once used, without realizing how it crushed people. He felt an uncomfortable twist in his chest. When the manager walked away, Daniel approached her desk slowly. She blinked in surprise when she saw him standing there with a mop in hand. "Do not mind him," he said gently. "Some people forget what it is like to have real problems." Lucia exhaled shakily and gave a small smile. "Thank you. Most people here do not talk to janitors." "Maybe that is their loss," Daniel replied. "You seem like someone worth talking to." Her laughter was soft but genuine. "You are kind. That is rare here." He looked around her workspace. Neat, efficient, but personal. A framed photo of a little boy sat beside her keyboard, his smile bright and full of missing baby teeth. "He is adorable," Daniel said quietly. "Your son?" "Yes. His name is Jaime. He just turned 6 last week." Her voice softened when she spoke of him. "He loves dinosaurs and peanut butter sandwiches more than anything in the world." "You must be proud," Daniel said, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not expected. "I am," she replied, "even when it is hard." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I know I should not complain, but some days I wonder if hard work ever gets noticed. People look at me and see single mom before they see the effort." Daniel wanted to tell her that he saw it, that every late night and every exhausted smile mattered, but he stayed silent. His role, for now, was to listen. When he left the accounting floor, he found himself thinking about her words. Back in the janitor's closet, he stared at his reflection in the small metal mirror above the sink. His face was streaked with dust, his hair flattened under the cap. For the first time in years, he did not see a billionaire CEO. He saw a man trying to understand the people who worked for him. That afternoon, as he mopped the hallway near the break room, he overheard 2 employees gossiping. "Did you see the new janitor? He keeps hanging around Lucia," one whispered, probably hoping she will notice him. "She is too nice for her own good." "Yeah, poor thing. She will learn soon enough this place does not reward kindness." Daniel's grip on the mop tightened, but he said nothing. He had built a company filled with brilliant minds, yet somewhere along the line, he had allowed arrogance to replace empathy. Maybe that was why he had come down here to see what he had lost. As evening approached, most employees left, and the office grew quiet again. Lucia was still at her desk, typing under the glow of a small desk lamp. Daniel hesitated at the door, then walked in. "You are still here?" he asked. "Almost done," she replied without looking up. "It is easier to work when no one is watching." Daniel placed a small paper cup of coffee beside her. "From the lobby machine," he said with a smile. "It is terrible, but it is warm." She looked up, surprised, then laughed. "Thank you, Dan. That might be exactly what I need." As she took the cup, their fingers brushed again, and something unspoken passed between them, respect, maybe gratitude, or something deeper, neither dared to name. He watched her sip the coffee, her tired eyes softening in the dim light, and for the first time in years, Daniel Morgan felt human again. The third day began with a grey drizzle that painted the city streets with reflections of light. Daniel Morgan arrived early again, his uniform damp at the shoulders as he carried his mop and supplies through the quiet lobby. The smell of coffee drifted faintly from the break room, mingling with the sharp scent of cleaning detergent. As he worked, his thoughts kept returning to Lucia Rodriguez, the soft kindness in her voice, the quiet determination in her eyes, and the photo of her little boy that sat proudly on her desk. He wondered how many people in his company lived like her, balancing exhaustion and hope every single day. Around mid-morning, he made his rounds through the accounting floor again. Lucia was there, her brow furrowed, typing quickly. A small sticky note was taped to her monitor with a reminder written in neat handwriting, "Pick up Jaime at 5:30. Do not be late." Daniel smiled faintly when he saw it. Before he could greet her, The same supervisor from the day before appeared at her desk, holding a printed report. "Miss Rodriguez, this spreadsheet is incomplete," he snapped. "You missed two of the revenue columns." Lucia looked up, startled. "That cannot be right. I double-checked those figures." "Then double-check them again," he said sharply, tossing the papers onto her desk. "And next time, try not to waste the company's time." He turned and walked away. Daniel's jaw tightened. Every instinct in him screamed to intervene, but he reminded himself that he was supposed to be invisible. Lucia glanced around, embarrassment coloring her cheeks, then quietly gathered the papers. "People like that forget they are talking to human beings," Daniel said softly as he passed by her desk. She looked up, surprised again that he spoke to her at all. "I try not to take it personally," she said with a small shrug. "If I get angry, he wins. If I stay calm, I win." Daniel admired that strength. "You are stronger than you think," he said quietly. Later, during the lunch hour, Lucia sat alone at a small table in the break room, unpacking a homemade sandwich and a small container of soup. Daniel had just finished cleaning the hallway and was about to leave when she waved him over. "Hey, Dan," she said with a smile. "I made too much soup this morning. Would you like some?" He hesitated again, that same unexpected warmth spreading in his chest. "You are sure?" "Positive," she said, pouring some into a paper cup and sliding it toward him. "My mom used to say sharing food makes it taste better." He accepted it gratefully. The soup was simple chicken, carrots, and noodles, but it was the best meal he had tasted in weeks. "You really should not spoil the janitor," he joked lightly. Lucia laughed. "I think you deserve it. You work harder than most people here." Daniel looked at her, genuinely touched. "You know, most people do not see us at all. We just blend into the walls." "That is because most people are too busy pretending to be important," she said softly. "But I think real importance comes from how you treat others, not what your title says." Her words hit deeper than she could have known. For years, Daniel had measured success by numbers and accolades, not humanity. Now, sitting across from this woman who had every reason to be bitter but chose kindness instead, he realized how far he had drifted from that truth. When lunch ended, Lucia gathered her things and smiled. "Thank you for listening," she said. "Sometimes it feels nice just to be heard." "Any time?" Daniel replied. "You have no idea how much good you do without even trying." That evening, as the office lights dimmed, Daniel stayed behind to clean. He passed by Lucia's desk again and noticed the framed photo of her son still glowing faintly in the lamplight. Next to it was a small handmade card written in crayon. "I love you, Mom." He felt something twist in his heart. She was not just surviving, she was fighting every day for someone she loved. When he left the building, the rain had stopped and the city was glowing under streetlights. He walked to his modest rented apartment, his thoughts heavy yet strangely peaceful. In the quiet, he took off his janitor's cap and stared at his reflection in the mirror. He looked older, humbler, but somehow more alive. The world had stopped treating him like a god, and he had started feeling like a man again. That night, before going to bed, Daniel wrote a note on the back of an old business card. "Kindness does not ask for recognition. It just happens." He folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket, unaware that the next morning would bring a moment that would test everything he had begun to learn. The following morning, the air was crisp and bright, sunlight pouring through the tall glass walls of Pinnacle Enterprises. Daniel Morgan, still disguised in his janitor uniform, arrived earlier than usual. The rhythm of his days had changed. What began as an experiment now felt like something deeper, almost like a quiet redemption. He greeted Hector with a nod before starting his routine on the accounting floor. By 8:30, employees were arriving, the same hurried energy filling the corridors. Lucia Rodriguez stepped off the elevator with her bag over her shoulder, balancing a cup of coffee and a folder of documents. She looked tired but determined. Daniel caught her smile as she passed by, and it was enough to warm the sterile air around him. Just before 10, an accident broke the morning calm. One of the interns tripped near the water cooler, sending papers flying everywhere. Daniel instinctively rushed forward to help, kneeling beside the young man. Together they gathered the pages, but in the process, a cup of coffee tipped and spilled across the floor, splashing near Lucia's desk. The dark liquid spread quickly. "Oh no," the intern gasped. "I am so sorry, Miss Rodriguez." Lucia jumped up from her chair, grabbing tissues. "It is all right. Do not worry about it," she said kindly. But the commotion drew attention. The same supervisor, Mr. Winters, appeared almost instantly. "What is going on here?" he demanded. His eyes fell on the mess, then on Daniel, who was already mopping the spill. "Of course," he muttered loudly enough for others to hear. "The janitor makes a mess, and the staff cleans up after him. Typical." Lucia froze, her expression shifting from embarrassment to quiet anger. "Actually, Mr. Winters," she said calmly, "he did not make the mess. He is cleaning it up because an intern spilled coffee." The manager blinked in surprise. "I was just making an assumption," she said evenly. Her tone was polite, but her words carried weight. "Maybe next time you should ask before blaming someone." The entire floor went silent. Daniel straightened slowly, his eyes meeting hers. For a long second, no one spoke. Then Mr. Winters cleared his throat, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. When he was gone, Lucia exhaled and turned to Daniel. "Are you all right?" He nodded. "I have been called worse," he said with a soft laugh. "Still," she replied, "no one deserves that." The small act of kindness hit Daniel harder than he expected. In his world of boardrooms and contracts, people rarely stood up for others unless it benefited them. But Lucia did it without hesitation, without knowing who he truly was. After the incident, Daniel continued cleaning, but his thoughts were tangled. Each time he passed her desk, he caught glimpses of her working focused, graceful, strong. She never complained, never gossiped, never spoke ill of anyone. That quiet dignity stirred something in him he could not name. Around lunchtime, Lucia approached him near the elevator holding a small brown paper bag. "You forgot this yesterday," she said with a teasing smile. "The sandwich you did not finish." Daniel took it, touched. "You keep feeding me, and I might start thinking you are an angel in disguise." "Do not ruin my reputation," she replied playfully, laughing. The sound lingered in his mind long after she left. Later that day, as the sun began to dip behind the skyline, Daniel stood near the large windows of the lobby, watching people leave for the evening. Lucia was one of the last. She looked exhausted but smiled when she saw him. "Long day," she said. "My son has a school project due tomorrow, so it will be an even longer night." "He is lucky to have you," Daniel said sincerely. "I think I am the lucky one," she replied before heading out the door. Daniel watched her disappear into the crowd. For the first time, he wondered what it would be like if people like her ran the world, people who led with kindness instead of ego. As he packed up his cleaning cart, he felt a strange ache in his chest. The experiment had started as a way to study his company's culture, but it had become something personal. Lucia had no idea who he was, yet she treated him with more respect and warmth than most of his executives ever had. Walking out into the cool evening air, Daniel looked up at the tall glass tower that bore his name and realized how little that name truly meant. Titles, wealth, and power, none of it could buy what he had found in 1 week of humility. Tomorrow, he promised himself, he would find a way to repay her kindness, though he had no idea how. The next day brought a warm breeze that softened the sharp edge of winter. The city outside Pinnacle Enterprises shimmered under the morning sun, and Daniel Morgan arrived earlier than usual. He no longer felt like an outsider moving through the building. The janitor's uniform had become strangely comfortable, as though it allowed him to move through the world unseen, but free. Inside, the lobby buzzed with the familiar rhythm of the workday. He began cleaning the polished glass doors, lost in thought, when the sound of laughter reached him from the far corner. Several junior employees were whispering among themselves, glancing at him and snickering. "Look at him," one said quietly, but not quietly enough. "Old guy scrubbing floors, probably failed at everything else." Another replied, "My dad says people like that just did not work hard enough." Their words stung in a way Daniel had not expected. Years of commanding boardrooms and managing thousands of employees had shielded him from such cruelty. It was strange to feel small again. Before he could respond, a soft voice interrupted the group. "Maybe you should not judge people you know nothing about," Lucia said firmly. She was standing nearby, arms crossed, her expression calm but resolute. The young employees shifted uncomfortably. "We did not mean anything by it," one muttered. "Then do not say it," she replied. "Respect costs nothing." The small group dispersed awkwardly, leaving the air thick with silence. Daniel looked at her, gratitude flickering in his eyes. "You have a habit of showing up right when I need reminding that good people still exist," he said quietly. Lucia smiled faintly. "I do not like bullies, no matter who they are. He nodded. You know, not many people would speak up like that. Maybe not, she said. But I teach my son that silence helps the wrong side. Daniel felt a deep admiration he could not quite voice. He had seen executives boast about ethics in meetings, but here was a woman living it quietly every day. Later that afternoon, he was mopping the hallway near the break room when Lucia appeared again, balancing her lunch container and a cup of tea. I owe you for yesterday's coffee, she said, setting a small muffin on the counter beside him. Homemade. My son and I baked them last night. He helped? Daniel asked with a smile. Yes, she said proudly. He insists he is going to be a chef, even though he cannot reach the counter without a stool. Daniel chuckled, picturing the scene. Sounds like a determined kid. He is, Lucia said warmly. He is my reason for everything. Every early morning, every late night, it is all for him. He must be lucky to have a mother like you, Daniel said, and his voice carried a sincerity that made her pause. She met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them again. Later, as the day wound down, Daniel walked through the upper floors delivering fresh cleaning supplies. In the elevator, he overheard two senior executives discussing quarterly targets and layoffs. One of them laughed coldly. If the numbers do not improve, we will just cut the new hires, replace them with automation. Daniel's stomach tightened. He had signed those kinds of approvals before, detached from the lives they affected. But now, faces came to mind: Lucia's, Hector's, even the nervous intern. He wondered how many good people had been erased from spreadsheets in the name of progress. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped out and stared at the skyline through the glass windows. His reflection looked back at him, still the janitor, but no longer the same man who had started this journey. That evening, as employees packed up to leave, Lucia stopped by the lobby on her way out. Long day? She asked. They all are, he replied, but today feels heavier. You will get used to it, she said kindly. Life has a way of testing us until we learn what matters. And what matters to you? He asked. She smiled softly. Kindness. It is the only thing that does not lose value. As she left, Daniel stood alone under the fading light, her words echoing in his mind. The janitor's mop in his hand felt less like a disguise and more like a reminder. Power meant nothing without compassion, and for the first time in years, he began to understand that lesson. The following morning, clouds hung low over the city, carrying the promise of rain. Inside Pinnacle Enterprises, the hum of computers and clicking heels filled the building like background music to another long day. Daniel Morgan, still wearing the same blue coveralls, pushed his cleaning cart through the hallways that now felt strangely familiar. He had started this week to learn about his company, but somewhere along the way, he had begun to learn about himself. As he entered the accounting department, he saw Lucia Rodriguez standing near the printer, frowning at a stack of papers. Her shoulders were tense, her brow creased. Daniel approached carefully. Everything all right? He asked. She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. Just another day of deadlines and broken printers, she said with a weary laugh. The usual, he chuckled. I thought machines were supposed to make life easier. That is what they tell us, she replied, tapping the printer lightly. But sometimes I think they just remind us how little control we have. Daniel leaned on the handle of his mop and studied her. Even tired, she carried herself with quiet dignity, a strength that seemed born from years of holding her world together with her bare hands. You always seem calm, he said softly, even when everything is falling apart. She shrugged gently. If I panic, my son panics, so I stay calm for him. He thinks I can fix anything. Daniel smiled, though there was sadness behind it. Maybe you can. Lucia looked at him curiously. You talk like someone who has seen both sides of life. Maybe I have, he said, choosing his words carefully. I used to think success meant being untouchable, but now I think it means being human. She tilted her head, studying him. You are not like the others here, she said finally. You listen. Daniel's chest tightened, and for a brief moment, he wanted to tell her everything: who he really was, what he was doing, why he had chosen this disguise. But he stopped himself. Not yet. He could not ruin the honesty of this connection with truth that sounded like a lie. Around lunchtime, a heavy rain began to fall outside. Most employees stayed at their desks, eating sandwiches at their computers. Daniel was wiping down the windows when he noticed Lucia standing near the lobby entrance, staring out at the downpour. She looked worried. Everything okay? He asked, walking closer. My babysitter just called, she said, biting her lip. She cannot pick up my son from school because the street is flooded. I do not know how I am going to get him. Daniel looked at the storm outside, then back at her pale face. Where does he go to school? Westfield Elementary, she said quickly. It is only 2 miles away, but the buses stopped running because of the weather. Without hesitation, Daniel grabbed his jacket from the cleaning cart. I will drive you. What? No, you do not have to. It is not a problem, he said firmly. You should not have to worry about getting your child home safe. She hesitated, torn between gratitude and caution, but the urgency in her voice gave way to trust. Thank you, Dan, she said softly. The drive through the storm was slow and tense. Rain hammered against the windshield, and the wipers struggled to keep up. Lucia sat quietly beside him, clutching her phone, checking for updates from the school. Daniel kept his focus on the road, though he could feel her anxiety like static in the air. When they arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty. Teachers were guiding the remaining children to the covered walkway. Then, through the sheets of rain, a small boy came running. "Mom!" he cried, his backpack bouncing with each step. Lucia jumped out of the car, rushing to meet him. Daniel watched as she knelt and wrapped her arms around the boy, shielding him from the rain. For a moment, the storm did not matter. The sight stirred something deep inside him, a memory of his own childhood, of his mother waiting by the window long before he became too busy to call. When they returned to the car, Hamie sat in the back seat, shivering slightly but smiling. "Thank you, mister," he said politely. "You saved my mom." Daniel laughed quietly. "I think your mom could have saved herself." Jaime grinned. "She always does." The ride back was filled with small talk and the soft hum of rain. By the time they reached Lucia's apartment complex, the storm had weakened. She turned to Daniel, her eyes shining. "I do not know how to thank you." "You already did," he said. "You reminded me what matters." As she stepped out with her son, Daniel watched them disappear up the stairs. The sound of their laughter drifted faintly through the rain. Sitting alone in his car, Daniel realized something he had not admitted even to himself. This week had started as a lesson in leadership, but now it was becoming a lesson in humanity and maybe even love. The morning after the storm, the city felt new. Sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off wet streets and gleaming windows. Daniel Morgan arrived at Pinnacle Enterprises later than usual, his thoughts still lingering on the night before, on Lucia Rodriguez's grateful smile, on her son's innocent voice calling him a hero. For the first time in years, he had gone to bed feeling something he could not name. It was not pride, not success, but a kind of quiet warmth that reached the corners of his heart, long left untouched. Inside the building, life went on as if nothing had changed. The elevators chimed, the scent of fresh coffee filled the air, and employees hurried past without ever looking at the janitor in the hallway. Yet for Daniel, everything had changed. He was beginning to see his company not as a structure of glass and steel, but as a collection of people, each with their own stories, worries, and small acts of courage. Around mid-morning, Lucia appeared, her hair still slightly damp from the morning rush, but her smile as bright as ever. She spotted Daniel polishing the brass railing near the stairwell. "You made it in," she said warmly. "I was worried you would catch a cold after yesterday." Daniel smiled. "I am tougher than I look." "You proved that yesterday," she said, her tone softening. "Jaime could not stop talking about you. He drew you a picture." She reached into her bag and handed him a folded sheet of paper. On it, drawn in colorful crayon, was a tall man holding an umbrella over a woman and a child. At the bottom, in careful letters, the boy had written, "Thank you, Mr. Dan." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "He did this?" he asked quietly. "He has a good heart." "He takes after his mum," Lucia replied with a proud smile. "You really made an impression." He looked at the picture again, and something in him shifted. He had spent years chasing numbers and power, but this simple drawing felt like the most genuine recognition he had ever received. As the day went on, Daniel found himself moving through his duties almost automatically, his mind elsewhere. In the afternoon, he stopped by the maintenance office, where Hector was checking inventory. "You look different," Hector said, squinting at him. "Different how?" Daniel asked. "Lighter?" Hector said with a grin. "Maybe you finally realized mopping floors is good for the soul." Daniel laughed softly. "You might be right." When he returned to the accounting floor later, he found Lucia struggling with a stack of binders. Without hesitation, He stepped in to help. "You do not have to," she began, but he cut her off gently. "I insist." Together they carried the heavy load to a nearby shelf. "Thank you," she said, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Most people just walk by. Most people do not see what is right in front of them," Daniel replied. She gave him a curious look. "You always say things like that. You sound like someone who has lived a few different lives." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Maybe I have, or maybe I just made too many mistakes before learning what matters." Lucia studied him for a moment, her expression softening. "Whatever mistakes you made, they turned you into someone kind. That is what counts." Her words lingered long after she walked away. That evening, when the office emptied out, Daniel stood by the large windows of the lobby, the city glowing beyond the glass. He pulled Jaime's drawing from his pocket and unfolded it again. The crayon lines were crooked and bright, imperfect yet full of life. He realized that somewhere between pretending to be a janitor and rediscovering what kindness looked like, he had become a different man. He thought about revealing the truth to Lucia, about explaining everything, but fear held him back. What if she saw him differently once she knew? What if the honesty of their connection disappeared the moment she realized he was the man whose name was etched on the side of the building? For now, he would wait. He would keep showing up, keep helping quietly, keep learning from her. The rain had stopped, the city lights shimmered, and for the first time in years, Daniel Morgan no longer felt alone. The next day unfolded quietly, the kind of calm that hides beneath the noise of everyday life. The week was nearly over, and Daniel Morgan could feel the weight of his secret pressing harder with every passing hour. He had begun this journey as an experiment, a private test of leadership and empathy, but now it had become something far more personal. The people he had met, the lessons he had learned, and the kindness he had received, especially from Lucia Rodriguez, had changed him in ways he could never have anticipated. That morning, as he pushed his cart through the halls of Pinnacle Enterprises, he noticed Lucia sitting at her desk, her hand pressed to her forehead. Her computer screen glowed with spreadsheets, but her eyes looked tired, distant. He hesitated before approaching. "Rough morning?" he asked gently. She looked up and smiled faintly. "You could say that. Jaime woke up with a fever, and the babysitter could not stay. I had to drop him at the neighbor's before coming here. I feel awful for leaving him." Daniel's heart clenched. "You are doing your best," he said softly. "He is lucky to have you." "Sometimes I do not feel that way," she admitted. "Being a single mom means constantly feeling like you are failing at everything." "You are not failing," Daniel said, his voice low and certain. "You are fighting. There is a difference." She looked at him for a long moment, and in her eyes he saw both exhaustion and courage, a balance he recognized now as the quiet strength that kept the world moving. Later that morning, an announcement came over the intercom. The CEO would be visiting the accounting department that afternoon. The air shifted instantly. Employees straightened their desks, whispered nervously, and speculated about what the visit might mean. Lucia frowned slightly. "I wonder what that is about," she said. "I have never even seen him in person." Daniel felt his stomach twist. The irony was almost unbearable. He was standing right there, holding a mop, invisible as ever, while they prepared to impress the man he used to be. When afternoon came, tension filled the air. Mr. Winters, the department head, moved briskly from desk to desk, snapping at employees to work faster. Lucia remained calm, focused on her screen, though Daniel could see her hands tremble slightly. He wanted to tell her the truth right then, to free her from the pressure of this illusion, but he could not. Instead, he watched silently as she continued her work with quiet grace. When the announcement finally came that the CEO's visit was postponed until the following week, the entire floor exhaled in relief. Lucia laughed softly. "All that worry for nothing." Daniel smiled. "Sometimes life gives us a break when we least expect it." That evening, as most employees left, Lucia lingered behind to finish her reports. Daniel stayed too, pretending to polish the floors but really just waiting for a moment to talk to her. When she finally stood to leave, he said, "Lucia, can I ask you something?" She paused, her bag over her shoulder. "Of course. If someone had lied to you," he began carefully, "but for a good reason to understand something, to make things right, would you forgive them?" She frowned, clearly puzzled. "That depends," she said slowly. "If the lie was meant to hurt me, then no. But if it came from a place of wanting to change, wanting to be better, Maybe I would. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what they do after. Her words struck him like a chord that had been waiting to be played. You always seem to know the right thing to say, he murmured. I do not, she replied with a gentle smile. I just know what I would want someone to tell me. As they walked toward the lobby, the night lights reflected across the marble floor, casting soft patterns on the walls. Lucia turned to him before leaving. You know, Dan, you remind me of my father. He used to say that character is not built in comfort, it is built in struggle. He sounds like a wise man, Daniel said quietly. He was, she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. I lost him when I was young, but sometimes, when people are kind for no reason, I feel like he is still around somehow. She smiled once more and stepped out into the night. Daniel stood there long after the doors closed, the echo of her words wrapping around him like a quiet promise. He reached into his pocket and unfolded Jaime's drawing again. In the flickering light, the child's crayon lines seemed to shimmer like truth itself. The man with the umbrella, the woman, and the boy beneath it, this was who he wanted to be. Not the billionaire everyone feared, but the man who chose kindness, even when no one was watching. The weekend arrived quietly, bringing with it a rare stillness that felt almost unreal after the chaos of the week. Daniel Morgan sat in his small rented apartment, staring out the window as sunlight spilled across the floor. On the table beside him lay a neatly folded janitor's uniform, a mop leaning against the wall, and a notebook filled with thoughts he had written late at night. For years, he had lived surrounded by luxury, yet nothing in those penthouses had ever felt as honest as this simple room. The week as a janitor was supposed to end tomorrow, but the idea of returning to his old office no longer filled him with pride, it filled him with hesitation. He thought about Lucia Rodriguez and her son Jamie, about the drawing still tucked safely in his wallet, and about the words she had spoken the night before. That forgiveness belonged to those who understood change. Daniel wanted to be worthy of that forgiveness, even if Lucia never discovered what he had hidden. Late Sunday afternoon, a knock sounded on his door. It startled him. When he opened it, Hector stood there holding a brown envelope. You forgot this at the maintenance office, the older man said with a grin. And before you ask, no, I did not open it. Daniel took it, confused. What is it? Looks like a memo from corporate, Hector said. Came through internal mail. After he left, Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a printed reminder. Monday morning, 8 o'clock. CEO Board Meeting Annual Staff Review. His own name printed in bold letters at the top. It was a jarring reminder of the double life he had been living. Tomorrow, the mask would come off. That night, Daniel barely slept. He lay awake, turning over everything that had happened, every word Lucia had said, every moment of decency he had witnessed. When dawn came, the sky was pale gold. He dressed in the janitor's uniform one last time and walked to Pinnacle Enterprises before anyone else arrived. The building was silent, its marble floors reflecting the first rays of morning light. He found himself in the accounting department, standing beside Lucia's desk. Her mug was still there, half a packet of tea beside it, and the photo of Jaime smiling at the beach. He traced the frame gently with his fingers, realizing how much this woman and her small acts of kindness had changed his understanding of power. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him. You are in early, Lucia's voice said. He turned and saw her standing there, surprised but smiling. I could say the same to you, he replied. Big presentation today, she said. We are supposed to submit department evaluations. She walked closer, then noticed something in his expression. Are you all right, Dan? You look different. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. Just thinking about how fast time moves. 1 week ago, I did not even know your name. Now I cannot imagine this place without seeing you in it. She blinked, caught off guard by his sincerity. You are too kind, she said softly. But you will not have to imagine it. I will still be here, cleaning up everyone's coffee spills. He laughed quietly, but there was a sadness beneath it. Maybe not for long, he said, more to himself than to her. Lucia tilted her head. What do you mean? Before he could answer, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen and sighed. It is my manager. He needs me in the conference room right now. Go, Daniel said. Do not keep him waiting. She smiled apologetically and hurried off, leaving him alone once again. As he watched her disappear down the hall, Daniel took a deep breath. The time for pretending was almost over. He walked slowly toward the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. When the doors opened, He stepped inside and caught his reflection in the mirrored wall. The janitor stared back at him, but behind the tired eyes, he could see the man he used to be and the man he was becoming. Tomorrow, he would stand before the same executives who had only ever seen his authority. This time, he would tell them what he had learned from the people they ignored, and somewhere deep inside, he made himself a silent promise that after the meeting, he would tell Lucia everything, the truth, no matter what it cost. Monday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability that Daniel Morgan could feel deep in his chest. The rain from the night before had cleared, leaving the air cool and clean, but his thoughts were heavy. Today, his time as a janitor would end. He walked into Pinnacle Enterprises as he had for the past week, pushing his cart, nodding to the few early employees who barely noticed him. Each step through the shining lobby felt like a countdown to the truth he could no longer delay. Upstairs, in the executive suite, preparations for the annual staff review were already underway. Assistants rushed with coffee trays and folders, the boardroom lights glowed bright, and nameplates were neatly arranged around the long table. His name, bold and polished, waited at the head of the table. For now, though, Daniel stayed below, on the floors where life happened quietly. He wanted one last walk among the people who had unknowingly taught him what it meant to be human again. When he reached the accounting floor, Lucia Rodriguez was there as always, coffee in hand, scanning her notes. She looked focused but anxious. Daniel approached slowly, his heart tightening with each step. "Morning," he said softly. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Dan. You are early again. I think you beat the cleaning crew." He smiled faintly. "Old habits die hard." She laughed, unaware of the storm gathering behind his calm expression. "How is Jaime?" he asked. "Much better," she said with relief. "He is already asking when he can visit my office. I told him maybe one day when the big boss is not around." Daniel's throat went dry. "What would you do," he asked carefully, "if you suddenly realized someone close to you had been hiding who they really were?" Lucia blinked, confused by the question. "I guess it would depend on why they hid it," she said slowly. "If it was to hurt me, I would walk away. But if it was to understand me, maybe I would give them a chance to explain." Her words steadied him more than she could have known. He wanted to tell her right there, to end the lie, but a voice over the intercom interrupted them. "Attention staff, all department heads and supervisors, please report to the 10th floor conference room for the annual review." Lucia sighed. "That is my cue. Wish me luck." "You do not need luck," he said quietly. "You already have integrity." She gave him a puzzled look at his strange tone, but smiled anyway. "See you later, Dan." As she walked away, Daniel watched her go, memorizing every detail, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the steady pace of her steps, the quiet confidence she carried even when no one was watching. When she disappeared around the corner, he turned toward the service elevator. Inside, the walls reflected his tired face. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up and removed the worn cap that had covered his head for a week. Then he unbuttoned the top of his uniform, revealing a crisp white shirt underneath. He stared at his reflection, half janitor, half billionaire, caught between the two lives he had lived. The elevator doors opened to the top floor. The sound of voices and shuffling papers filled the air as Daniel stepped into the boardroom. Conversation stopped. Eyes widened. The executives who had not seen him in days looked stunned. One finally spoke. "Sir? You? Where have you been?" Daniel took his seat at the head of the table, his expression calm. "Working," he said simply. "Downstairs." Confusion rippled through the room. He could see questions forming, disbelief mixing with discomfort. He let the silence settle before continuing. "For the past week, I have been here not as your CEO, but as your janitor, and what I saw changed everything I thought I knew about this company." Murmurs spread, some shocked, some nervous. He placed his hands flat on the table. "We have built a business on success and status, but somewhere along the way, we forgot the people who make it work, the ones who sweep the floors, who stay late, who give more than they ever get back. I saw disrespect, arrogance, and indifference, but I also saw kindness, humility, and strength from those who have the least." He paused, the image of Lucia flashing in his mind. "We will start making changes. Fair pay, humane schedules, and leadership that listens instead of commands. This company will remember what decency looks like." When he finished, the room was silent. Some executives looked embarrassed, others thoughtful. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he said, "And for those wondering if I regret it, no. It was the best decision I ever made." As the doors closed behind him, Daniel exhaled deeply. The truth was out. The hardest part still remained to face the woman who had unknowingly opened his eyes to it. When Daniel Morgan left the boardroom, the hallway felt impossibly quiet. The heavy door closed behind him, sealing in the stunned silence of a group of executives who had just witnessed something they would talk about for years. He loosened his tie slightly as he walked down the corridor, the echo of his footsteps mingling with the distant hum of office life below. The disguise was gone, but the lessons it had given him were not. For the first time in his career, he felt lighter not because the weight of leadership had vanished, but because it finally meant something again. By the time he reached the lower floors, the workday was in full swing. Employees bustled about, unaware of what had just unfolded upstairs. Daniel paused near the lobby, looking down at his reflection in the polished floor. He no longer saw the janitor or the billionaire, just a man trying to make things right. He needed to find Lucia Rodriguez. She deserved to hear the truth from him directly, not through rumors or the evening news. When he reached the accounting department, he saw her through the glass window, sitting at her desk, focused on a spreadsheet. The light from her monitor reflected softly on her face. He stood there for a moment, unsure how to begin. Finally, he took a deep breath and stepped inside. "Lucia," he said quietly. She looked up, surprised. For a second, she did not recognize him. His tailored suit, his confident stance. It was all so different from the humble man she had shared lunches and quiet conversations with. "Dan," she asked hesitantly, "what are you doing here?" He smiled faintly, though there was sadness behind it. "That is what I need to explain." She stood slowly, confusion clouding her expression. "You look different." "Because I am," he said gently. "My name is not Dan. It is Daniel Morgan." Her breath caught. "Daniel Morgan, as in—" "Yes," he said softly, "as in the CEO of Pinnacle Enterprises." The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Lucia took a step back, her eyes wide. "You are telling me that this whole time you were pretending to be a janitor?" "Not pretending," he said quickly. "Learning. I wanted to understand what this company had become from the ground up. I needed to see what life was like for the people who work hardest, but are seen the least." "So you lied," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Daniel winced. "Yes, I did, and I am sorry for that. I never meant to deceive you. I just wanted to experiment," she interrupted, her tone sharper now. "You could have told me the truth." "I know," he said, his voice low, "but if I had, everything between us would have changed. You would have treated me differently, and I would have lost the honesty that I found in you." Lucia crossed her arms, her expression torn between anger and disbelief. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this feels? I trusted you, Dan or Daniel, or whatever your name is. You let me talk about my life, my struggles, while you stood there knowing you could fix them with a single phone call." Daniel took a slow breath. "You are right. I could have, but then I would have missed the most important lesson of my life. You showed me what strength looks like, Lucia. You reminded me of what I lost, chasing power. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know the truth." For a long moment, she said nothing. The office around them buzzed faintly, the sound of keyboards and printers filling the silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter but firm. "I do not know what to say. I need time." He nodded. "You can have all the time you need." He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, she said softly, "Was anything real? Or was it all part of your experiment?" He stopped, his back to her. "Every moment with you was real," he said. "That is what scared me the most." Then he walked out, leaving her standing there in a swirl of shock and emotion. As the elevator doors closed around him, Daniel felt the ache of honesty, a strange kind of pain that still felt cleaner than the lies he had carried for years. The next few days passed like slow-moving clouds. The truth about Daniel Morgan's undercover week spread quickly through Pinnacle Enterprises. Some employees were stunned, some skeptical, and others inspired. But no one spoke to him quite the same way again. The quiet ease he had found as Dan the janitor had vanished, replaced by respectful silence and nervous smiles. Daniel sat alone in his office, looking out at the skyline. The city stretched endlessly beneath him, just as it always had, but somehow it looked smaller now. He missed the simplicity of the lower floors, the scent of coffee, the clatter of keyboards, the sound of Lucia's laugh echoing softly across the room. He had tried calling her once, but she had not answered. He did not blame her. She had every right to need space. He had crossed a line between honesty and disguise, and no explanation could erase that. Late one evening, as most employees had gone home, Daniel made his way down to the accounting department. The lights were dim, but a small lamp glowed on one desk, Lucia's. She was still there, typing quietly, unaware of his presence. He paused by the door, watching her for a moment. She looked tired, yet focused, her determination shining through the weariness. He finally spoke, his voice soft. "You should not still be here this late." She froze, then turned slowly. Her expression was cautious, guarded. "Some of us do not have the luxury of leaving early," she said evenly. He stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. "I did not come here to defend myself. I came to tell you that what you said was right. I had power, and I used it the wrong way. I thought understanding people required pretending to be one of them. But you showed me that what really matters is how we treat people, whether they know who we are or not." Lucia studied him quietly. "You did not need to prove that by deceiving everyone." "I know," he said, "and I am sorry. Truly, I cannot undo what I did, but I can make it mean something. The policies I announced, they are already being approved. Pay increases, fairer schedules, medical support programs for single parents. It will not erase the lie, but maybe it can make life better for the people who never get noticed." Her expression softened slightly. "That is good," she said carefully, "but you did not have to come here to tell me that." "I know," he said again. "I came because I needed to thank you. You reminded me what decency looks like when the world stops believing in it." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with a pen. "You do not owe me anything." "Maybe not," he replied, "but I owe you honesty, at least now. I meant everything I said before. The kindness you showed me when I was nobody, the way you stood up for people, it changed me. I have spent years surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. You told me what I needed to hear." There was a long silence, filled only by the hum of the overhead lights. Finally, Lucia sighed. "I do not know if I can ever see you the same way again," she admitted. "I liked who you were when you were Dan. You were humble, genuine. I do not know who Daniel Morgan is." Daniel's voice broke slightly when he answered, "Maybe I do not know either, but I am trying to be the man you thought I was." Something in his tone softened her anger. For the first time in days, she met his eyes without resentment. "I believe people can change," she said quietly, "but trust takes time." "Then I will wait," he said simply. He started to leave, but she stopped him with a small voice. "Dan, or Daniel," she said, almost smiling. "Jaime still talks about you. He said you are the only adult who listened to his stories about dinosaurs." Daniel laughed softly. "Then tell him I am still listening." Lucia nodded, her expression gentler now. As he walked away, the tension between them remained, but it no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Outside the building, the night was cool and clear. Daniel looked up at the stars and whispered to himself, "She saw me when I was invisible. The least I can do now is be the kind of man who deserves to be seen." The weeks that followed moved gently, like the slow turning of a page. The building that once felt cold and distant began to hum with a different kind of energy. Daniel Morgan's changes were no longer words on paper, they were actions. The janitorial team received fair pay and proper benefits for the first time in years. Parents were offered flexible hours. Departments that had once operated on fear now found themselves guided by something closer to trust. But despite the progress, one connection still remained uncertain. Lucia Rodriguez kept her distance. She spoke to Daniel when necessary, her tone polite but reserved. He understood. Trust was not something that could be rebuilt with apologies. It needed time, consistency, and proof, and so he gave her that. Each morning, he greeted her with quiet respect. Each evening, he left her a note of appreciation for her team's work, never signing it with his title, just his first name. One chilly Friday evening, as the last employees prepared to leave, Daniel stepped out of his office and took the elevator down to the lobby. Lucia was standing there, adjusting her scarf, waiting for the rain to ease. The sound of thunder rolled in the distance, soft and low. He approached her carefully. "Looks like the weather is repeating itself," he said with a small smile. She turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "At least there is no flood this time." "Small blessings," he replied. For a moment, they stood side by side, watching the rain streak down the tall glass windows. "How have you been?" he asked. "Busy," she said honestly. "But things at work feel different now. People are less afraid. They talk more. I think that means you are doing something right." "It was not just me," he said quietly. "It was all of you. I just finally started listening." She looked at him, her expression softening. "You really meant what you said that day, did you not? About changing things." "Every word," he said. "I learned that leadership is not about being the loudest in the room. It is about being the first to listen, the first to help, and the last to take credit." She smiled a little at that. "That sounds like something Dan would say." "Maybe he rubbed off on me," Daniel said, his eyes glinting. The tension between them eased into something gentle and real. Lucia hesitated for a moment, then said, "Jaime made you another drawing." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Daniel unfolded it slowly. This time, it showed 3 figures, Lucia, Jaime, and himself, all standing under the same umbrella. At the top, in bright red crayon, the words read, "My mom's friend who helps people." For a long time, Daniel could not speak. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. "He is quite the artist," he said finally, his voice low. "He has a good heart," Lucia replied. "Like his mother," Daniel said, and she blushed slightly, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "You know," she said softly, "for someone who used to run the world from the top floor, you have gotten good at being down here." "That is because down here is where I learned what being human actually means," he replied. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle. Lucia looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe we should start over. No secrets this time." Daniel's smile was warm, genuine. "I would like that very much." As they stepped out into the misty evening, the city lights reflected off puddles like tiny constellations beneath their feet. For the first time, Daniel did not feel the weight of his title or his fortune. He felt grounded, real, alive. Beside him, Lucia walked with quiet confidence, her arm brushing against his. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter echoed in memory, reminding him that redemption did not come from power or money, it came from kindness. And as they disappeared into the soft glow of the city, one truth lingered in the air. She had treated him with compassion when he had nothing, and in doing so, she had given him everything. In this emotional cinematic journey of redemption, kindness, and second chances, a powerful CEO disguises himself as a janitor to rediscover humanity through the eyes of a struggling single mother and her child. Their bond becomes a touching reminder that wealth means nothing without compassion. This heartwarming narrative belongs among the best millionaire stories that inspire empathy and moral reflection. As the man learns humility and the woman proves that dignity shines brightest in hardship, their intertwined paths reveal that the richest lessons are often found in unexpected places. With heartfelt performances and cinematic realism, this story captures the essence of modern millionaire stories about kindness, respect, and transformation. It explores how one act of sincerity can heal years of arrogance. Through rain-soaked nights, quiet confessions, and unspoken understanding, the narrative stands as one of the most moving millionaire stories of our time. Whether you seek emotional healing, romance grounded in humanity, or uplifting storytelling that restores faith in decency, this unforgettable tale proves that true value lies not in money but in love, forgiveness, and integrity. A timeless example of millionaire stories that touch the heart and remind us what it truly means to be human.